probably be doing a little bit of streaming if you wanted, but you're here. You're here, you get points, so I am taking attendance, and I'm grateful that you're here. All right, Parliamentary Procedure, Robert's Rules of Order can alter the course of the world. All right, first 3 women bishops in the Episcopal Church. Barbara Harris, Bishop Suffragan in Massachusetts, 1988, February 8th, I think. Jane Dixon, Bishop Suffragan where? Washington, D.C. She's the second. In between Barbara and Jane was Penelope Pennison in New Zealand, I believe. Right, and then Mary Adelia McLeod. Where was Mary Adelia the bishop? Anybody? Vermont. Thank you, Dick Hamlin. And Mary Adelia was the first what, Dick?
First diocesan.
First woman diocesan. And here's the thing why I started caring about parliamentary procedure. We were having a gathering. Back in the day, we used to have gatherings of the province 5 and 6 clergy women. And during one of these conversations, Gay Jennings, who used to be the president of the House of Deputies, some of you will know Gay, one of the smartest people in the world. Gay Jennings came, and Gay was telling a story of how in the House of Bishops, it was these 3 women and lots of guys. And there was at that point a sense, because of a conscience clause that got passed, Port Lucie is where it happened, and there was a conscience clause that said, I don't have to ordain a woman. Because theologically, I just can't wrap my little brain around it. So it was a resolution. Now the canons said that women could be ordained. But still, in the 90s, this was not happening. But what was interesting is anytime, and the women weren't getting anywhere to change it. And then Sally Johnson, who was the chancellor of the Diocese of Minnesota, Sally got together with Gay, and then got together with Barbara and Jane and Mary Adelia, and said, you need to learn Robert's Rules of Order. Because guys were like, oh, let's just table it. And they'd be like, oh, we'll table it. We won't have that conversation. So none of them needed to go on record, right? The progressive guys never needed to go on record saying that they were going to actually let the other folks, this very small minority, say, no, you don't need to ordain women. They just table it. And what happened is that Sally and Gay taught them the rules of Robert's Rules of Order, and how what they were doing was not correct. And then they could do the parliamentary procedure to get what they needed done, and then creating like the group of folks who wanted to be with the cool kids, like, don't you want to support us? And they began to make the changes. I heard the story and I thought, because I was a lesbian. And it was hard back in the day to be gay or lesbian, trans, we didn't really talk about that, right, bisexual, somehow or another we were ordaining folks. But we got really kind of clear after Bishop Jean Robinson in 2003, and then 6, and then 9. Yeah, 3 in Minnesota. Jean Robinson was confirmed. And then the Anglican Church thought it was going to go off the cliff. And then the Church of England and Archbishop Rowan Williams was weighing in on experience of having the Archbishop of Canterbury speak out against my candidacy in San Francisco, and he'd never met me because I was a lesbian. So, and then we went to General Convention, and that was then in 2006, and it wasn't pretty. And we passed a resolution, we didn't, but a resolution eventually did get passed, that said we would not ordain people whose manner of life other folks found troubling. So there was all sorts of back and forth. The House of Deputies said no to it, the House of Bishops said yes to it, and then Catherine Jefferts-Schori, just newly elected first woman presiding bishop, came back to the House of Deputies. Bonnie Anderson knows about this. Came back to the House of Deputies, and there was a move to reconsider it. And then the House of Deputies, because Catherine Jefferts-Schori said, give me this, pass this resolution so that I can be accepted with the councils of the other planets. We could all decide whether that was good or bad, but the House of Deputies reconsidered and went with the House of Bishops. And I was so angry and so sad. And I realized I could do one of two things. I could become extremely bitter, or I could organize. And so we created something called the Chicago Consultation, because our first meeting was in Chicago. And we gathered theologians from around the world. And the whole point, we had conversations, the first conversations on sexuality in the Anglican Communion in the continent of Africa, the first ones ever in 2011, 2013, and 2015. Bringing together people who were in the movable middle. Bringing together people in Africa, not to convince people, but to get to know people and to study Scripture together. What wound up happening in the course of that, this fellow is Mote Magomba. Mote is from Tanzania. Mote came up to me like the second day or so in our conversations in Africa, and he's sobbing, and he's like, I need to confess I have sinned against you. And I was like, Mote, we've known each other for 12 hours. We've had time to sin against me. He said this with tears. He said, Bonnie, I did not know that you could be a Christian and gay. I am a teacher. I am a priest. I will go back to Tanzania and I will tell people. And he did. And then he came at the invitation of the president of House of Deputies. Bonnie Anderson invited like 9 or so folks to our general convention. There were 3 groups that paid for bishops and other theologians to come to the House, to General Convention in 2009, to come and, he spoke in Indianapolis, so that was later, 12. So anyway, and Beth Taylor was all part of this. Beth Taylor wandered around with the climate of Japan. But the idea is we brought people to come to the House to General Conventions and to see our polity, because they did not know our polity. And some of them knew our polity, they just didn't like our polity. But what I became very clear about people, you could make a difference. So Beth can tell you at one point at Seabury, and Ruth Myers did this with me. Some of you will know Professor Ruth Myers. Ruth Myers and I were the co-conveners of this thing. And one of the things we did is I had a parishioner, she was like 8 months pregnant, not sure how she did it, but she laid on the floor and she drew a map of the Episcopal Church, and I called it Where West Wing Meets the Church. And we had all of the dioceses written out, and we had the name of every single deputy. We weren't bothering with the House of Bishops. We knew the House of Bishops would follow the House of Deputies. So we had the name of every single deputy, and we had an event where we walked around on this map with dots. Yellow dots, red dots, green dots. And we looked at every deputation to try to figure out, are they for us, against us, or are they in the middle? If they were for us, we left them alone. If they were against us, we left them alone. And we went for the people in the middle. And we changed things. And so that's when I realized, oh, if you organize, it's amazing. So, I learned how systemic institutional change can take place through organizing and parliamentary procedure. You have to know the rules to change the rules. Right? Parliamentary procedure comes from parliament, literally. And that you apply parliamentary procedure to a thing known as a deliberative assembly, which was first described by Edmund Burke in 1741 in Bristol, right? And a deliberative assembly, and he was talking about Parliament when he said it, but this is what he said about deliberative assemblies. Come on, there it is. I love this. A deliberative assembly is a group of people having or assuming freedom to act in concert, meeting to determine in full and free discussion courses of action taken in the name of an entire group. So this group gets together, and the group meets in one place, right? They meet in one place, and every single person's view matters and is made known through voting, right? And I just love this notion, friends, that we can make something happen through our ability to speak and to vote. We can make the changes that we're looking for. Okay, Robert's Rules of Order came as an American invention, right? You got the House of Burgess in this great, like, oh, AP history, Bonnie, thank you. Right? House of Burgess, 1619, they're taking this stuff from Parliament. First Continental Congress, 1774, so we've got that happening while Edmund Burke is talking to people in Bristol, right? So, and after the Continental Congress, Jefferson puts together a manual for how we're going to use, how we're going to have, because all these different groups, all the colonies had different ways of doing things, so they needed a manual to put together to figure out how they were going to move motions, etc., right? Cushing had a manual after that. And then you get Henry Martin Robert. His father, right, his father was a famous physician who was the first president of Morehouse. Super interesting, right? But Henry Robert, he's a church guy, right? And he winds up, he's a brigadier general, he's an engineer. You read Robert's Rules of Order, and you're like, well, of course he was an engineer, right? But this is what happened. He was asked to chair a meeting in New Bedford, Massachusetts, right, to deal with what might happen if the Confederates, right, attacked by sea. And he had to chair the meeting for the town for how they were going to respond. And he says to himself, oh, well, I hope Providence shows up. Well, it turns out Providence stayed in Rhode Island. and the meeting went 14 hours. Mr. Roberts then published his first edition in 1876, and he said he never wanted to go to a meeting like that ever again. Okay, we've got our own rules of order. All right, special rules of order are in the book, All Things Convention. That's this guy. It has everything. Super exciting. And you can see our rules of order in there. They're on pages, oh golly gee willikers, 7 and 8. When you're at a point, when you're a little bored, you can read more of it. All right? I think you should know at the request. Well, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's like, how long can you debate for? Oh, and I have one error in my slides. How you go back and forth, and how we do our convention. These are the special rules that we have adopted in addition to the most current version of Robert's rules. I have the 11th edition, given to me by my wardens. They're like, we don't know why you like this, but we know you do. All right. So let's do a resolution. Last year we had some resolutions. We haven't had some in a while. Last year we did. I was excited. But we had some folks who weren't exactly sure what to do. So we had some folks who kind of wandered to the microphone, offered an opinion, and wandered back and didn't really make a motion. Right? So they were actually, I think that was modeling more the House of Bishops style of doing things. My colleagues frequently wander to a microphone, have many thoughts, and then wander back away. And I'm like, I say, you don't do anything about that because I was a girl who went to 7 general conventions as a deputy, and now I've got 2 more as a bishop. Okay, so let's do a resolution here. Something important. Resolved. The 190th Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan does hereby grant seat, voice, and vote to diocesan staff dogs. Seems important, right? Okay, point. You can name the dog on the right. Anybody know the name of the dog on the right? Tally. That's hilarious that you know that. And the one on the left? Jasper. Okay, you guys are dorks. Thank you. All right. Okay, so this is what the thing is, though, right? But we have a resolution. It gets sent to the Committee on Reference, and there's a hearing. And this offers the committee and the people, because you go to the hearings. Tomorrow morning, go to the hearings at 8 a.m. Go to the hearings. It's part of the church door geekdom thing. It'll be fun, right? And then testimony is heard for and against the resolution. Suggestions may be made to strengthen the resolution or to change it. Grammatical and spelling errors can be fixed. The proposers can be available to answer questions or offer background material. And the Committee on Reference then makes a decision on how best to respond to the resolution in accordance with our diocesan canons. You propose this resolution, it gets sent to the Committee on Reference. The Committee on Reference has a hearing. You all attend with your opinions. And the question is, friends, if you look at the diocesan webpage, and if you look at who's listed, Jasper is not listed. He is merely the associate shepherd in training. Right? He's a puppy. He's not ready for a job. Right? We're going to give him food. Right? What about Simon, the feline of finance, who has been on the staff for a lot longer? And I might add, attended more Zoom calls than either Tally. All right? The Committee on Reference, after they've heard this, has 5 possible actions. They refer any resolution with funding implications to diocesan council and tell the proposers, well, you asked for money, we got to go ask council for that. You can present the resolution to council for consideration with or without a recommendation. The chair of the committee on reference will come to the podium, present the resolution, and frequently, but not always, will say, and the committee votes to recommend. The convention can decide, no, you're silly, we're not doing that. Or you can be like, oh, they thought about it more than I had, I didn't even know it was in the packet, and I actually couldn't find the packet, and I was waiting for it to be mailed to me, and then everybody told me it was online. So you maybe don't have a thought about this. Right? So you'll be like, oh, go with the committee. All right? So, in consultation with the proposers, you revise it, reword the resolution as to style, form, and content. Those of you with a quick grammatical eye may see something. Combine, you can combine to any two resolutions dealing with the same subject matter into a single resolution, giving the proposers of the resolutions the opportunity to participate in that combining process. And I love this one. You can determine the legality of the resolution in regards to the Constitution and canons of the convention, and a resolution, turns out, contrary to the Constitution and canons, may not be considered, unless you're actually trying to change those canons. Okay, one last bit. The convention can say the committee on reference says to the proposers, I'm sorry, is the dog actually even a pleasure? I mean, is the dog known to the chair? I had cats that ran for a warden in my previous parish. Like all the way through the process. And then at the point before we cast the vote, someone pointed out that Max had not pledged. And so Max was stricken from the ballot. He stuck up his tail, but fine. So you could say, okay, I don't actually agree with what the Committee on the Reference has said. So you bring it to the convention floor, and anyone can do that. If you cannot debate whether or not we should debate having this, you just have to vote on that sucker, and it only needs to pass by a majority. See what I mean about the thing I get a kick out of? Is that you matter. We get to change things. We get to implement our direction. You can show up here having finally found the booklet of all things, read it when you were bored, and you're like, wait a minute, I want to change something. Okay, it's been rewritten. Resolved, the 190th Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan does hereby grant seat, voice, and vote to diocesan staff dogs. Did you see the change? Yeah. What was the change? All of you people who were struck in us rare. There you are, you're so cute. I love it. You're like, there was an apostrophe that shouldn't have been in there, Bonnie. Right? We weren't going to say anything earlier because we thought, yeah. Okay, so the committee cleans up the grammar, changing dogs to dogs, chats with the proposers, and invites them to consider changing dogs to pets, so it's more inclusive. The committee votes to recommend and lets it go forward to the convention floor to be discussed and voted upon. I can hardly wait. Okay. Wait, I went the wrong way. Resolved. 190th Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan does hereby grant seat, voice, and vote to diocesan staff dogs. There we go. The proposers gracefully and humbly accept the committee's grammatical change. We are Episcopalians. We should not have done that. And I always wanted to refer various resolutions to the Committee on Syntax and Grammar. Right? When they had the split infinitives, I'm like, stop it, you're killing me. However, who knows why? They decide that they do not want to propose a more inclusive approach, and they decline. They decline to change dogs to pets, believing that to be, I don't know, a slippery slope to who knows where that might be. The childless cat lady, Robbie, coalesces, organizes, and prepares to offer an amendment when the resolution is presented on the floor. All right. The resolution is presented. The fun begins. The motion to recommend the resolution is made by the chair of the Committee on Reference. Because this resolution is coming from a committee, it requires no second, which is too bad, because you know what happens with seconds around here, friends? There are prizes! Not all the time, but I want you to know that. Making a motion is important. Being a team player, even more fun. Seconds matter. Right? Seconds matter. I'm just putting that out there, friends. Okay. The bishop calls for discussion. The bishop is the chair of the president of the gathering. The proposers come quickly to the microphone, and they're the first to be called upon by the chair, and they speak to the motion. And I've got an error coming up here, but the proposers say, and so they're able to speak because they proposed it for 3 minutes. It only seems longer, friends. Okay. All right. Speaking to a resolution, what to say? Your name and your congregation, right? Bonnie Perry, all of them. Me, I rise to speak in favor of this resolution right away. You give your name, you give your congregation. Are you for it or against it? Are you for it or against it? Right? I rise to speak in favor of this resolution, or I rise to speak against this resolution. And then give your reasons in 2 minutes or less. It's actually in our rules of order 1.5 minutes or less. That's Ruth Myers. That's General Convention. A discussion, when you're doing this, when you're making your impassioned, beautiful speech, resist trying to talk to everybody else who you want to vote for it. You're supposed to talk to the chair. Okay? Okay. They see someone sees that it says dogs and not pets. And so they suggest, they come to the podium, they come to the microphone, and they suggest a friendly amendment with that notion that it's just a little change, just do it. So let's just a friendly amendment to simply change dogs to pets and everybody's going to be happier. And the chair replies, there is no such thing as a friendly amendment ever. if you've got a resolution, it's really helpful if you have people who are not the usual suspects speaking to it. Right? So when I was working on the LGBT legislation, I rarely spoke. Everybody knew what I thought. But I ran the floor, and I had people lined up, right? And I was really clear, in order to get a resolution passed, I wasn't necessarily going to have somebody from the Diocese of Michigan, from the Diocese of Chicago, from the Diocese of Newark, from the Diocese of Massachusetts. Everybody knew they were where the liberals were, although Chicago wasn't always that way. Trust me. But what we would do is we would find the folks who were somewhere else to speak. This is Brian Baker. He's a dear, dear, dear friend. He became one of the co-conveners of the Chicago consultation. Brian was a deputy from Idaho and then from Northern California. And Northern California was one of the more conservative Californias. But Idaho, and when Brian would go to the microphone and speak, I'd be like, Brian, I want you to start by saying, Baker, Idaho, as a West Point graduate, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, I don't usually say that. I said, I really don't care. But he was so effective in championing progressive causes because people are like, oh, Idaho. Or the time the guy who had been involved with the Chicago consultation from Alabama stood up and started speaking for trans folks. They flipped it. So getting a wide variety of people to speak to something and having them lined up. If you want something to pass, friends, if you can wait for the Spirit, but the Spirit has given you gifts to use. I may regret this whole session, but anyway. Votes taken on the amendment. If it passes, the discussion then goes back to the amended resolution. And yes, you can amend an amendment, but people will get annoyed and confused. I literally, and I know Bonnie has certainly seen, the amendment to the amendment to the amendment, right? And then you're like, this is hilarious. All right. Wrong way. There we go. Calling the question or moving the question can be fun and also sometimes considered a gift to everyone. Right? No, we're done. We're done. Right? We, in our rules, I don't think you can do that for the first 10 minutes. 15. Woof, that takes half the fun out of it. So, when it seems that debate has gone on long enough, so there we go, 15 minutes, that should get changed. Anyway, it can be helpful to go to the microphone, call the question, which means you want to vote on whether or not we should keep talking about the subject. The motion's not debatable. Once it's asked for, and if it's in order, it must be voted upon. 2/3 majority must agree in ending debate. You can call a question on the amendment and the resolution, right? And then so if you say yes, we want it on both, then you take a vote on that. Everybody says yes, we're sick of this, we want to move on, I'm hungry. Right? And then you immediately vote on the amended resolution, right? Right? And if that passes, you can say, no, we don't want the amendment. Okay, now we're voting on the resolution as it was. Right? So you gotta keep track of that. And that's hilarious too. Right, Bonnie? Right. Amazing. Like Bonnie did this in the largest assembly that gets together like in the world. Right? And really wow. If you'd like for a resolution to fail, if you want a resolution to fail and to make it harder to pass, is to call for a vote by orders. Because then, you can have more than 5 people can say, you just get 5 people together, you go to the microphone, point of order, would like to blah, 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 and they are all delegates to the Diocese of Michigan Convention were like a vote by orders, which means you vote all clergy, all lay. And if it passes in the clergy, but fails in the lay, it fails. So you could have a whole bunch of clergy that want something and no lay people want it. But it can still pass. But if you don't want it to pass, call for a vote by orders. You can also ask to divide a resolution. You're like, yeah, I really like that. This thing is stupid. Right? And so you can ask to divide the resolution. Boom, you can just do it. Right? Any delegate must be immediately voted upon and decided by majority vote. People are like, yeah, I like that part, hate that part. In case you were wondering, the resolution regarding the staff tax, it was amended. And it was passed to read. There were several amendments, friends. Resolved 190th Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan does hereby grant seat, voice. Huh? They're not voting. They're not voting. Because remember, I said they weren't pledging. Right? Grant seat and voice, which may be a bark or meow. Well, that's kind of limited. To diocesan staff heads. The turtles, the birds, and the lizards are organizing. Questions?
I'm loving your humor. Keep it going.
Any questions, guys? That's not what we thought it was going to be. What, Stacy? Is that all right?
Yes.
Now, can you take that on the road?
Well, I just, again,
That's excellent.
it's, what you do matters. And it can kind of be fun. So jump in. Jump in and learn. All right, question? No? No? Okay, wake up. Here we go. Carmen?
It's my turn.
This was.
If it's on pause. This is Terry from Holy Cross in Novi. And I rise to ask for some clarification.
Yes, that's in order.
You talked a lot about making sure to take the amendments to the hearing, but then I'm not sure if you can then also ask for amendments at the convention.
Oh, yeah. No, you can say you go to the hearing, Terry, right? And you're like, I think this is really, like, this part I like, but this part is bad. And if I were you, I would change this. You're not, and the committee could possibly, with the proposers, right? It's a little vague for us. At General Convention, the committees can then consider it and they can make changes, right? Here, we're a little bit squishier, right? And then with the proposers, hey, we want to change that. Are you okay with that? Or the proposer's like, no. And then you go to the floor and you propose that amendment.
So you start at the hearing.
Yeah.
And then convention.
Yeah.
And can anybody propose an amendment?
Anyone who has seat and voice and vote can propose an amendment.
And can anyone call the question?
Anyone who has seat, voice, and vote can call the question.
Rick, regarding calling the question, who makes your slide on there?
Huh?
You have a slide about calling the question and calling the question on the amendment and on the resolution?
Yep.
Like the last bullet point.
Yep.
You call the question on the amendment and the original resolution. And you indicated that you vote on the amendment calling, and then you would go and vote on the resolution that you're voting on the question, not the resolution itself.
Yeah, right, so yes,
There's
yes.
three votes.
So what you're doing is you're saying, you call the question on the amendment and the resolution, we're done talking. And then you vote the amendment, and then you vote whatever happens with the resolution. Huh?
First you have to vote on calling the
We
question.
vote to call the question. Then, the next two votes are amendment and the resolution. Yeah, thank you.
Are there any more questions on this side?
All right. Go, Carmen. Corrado's got one.
On this stage, sing down there. I'm curious about the rules for dividing the resolution. Is it just like piecemeal? Does the person who proposed it just say like this part, this part, this part? Does that happen by the chair? How does that work?
So it needs to be able to stand on its own. Right? The resolve you craft out has to be able to stand on its own. Right? This piece is fine, this piece is fine. Be it resolved that diocesan staff pets have voice and vote. Be it dogs have voice and vote. Be it resolved that reptiles, because they are cold-blooded animals, shall not have voice. Right? Right? And so each one is split. Make sense? Yeah.
And it happens by the proposer or by the
No, well, the proposer would rarely want to do that. Usually the proposer wants the package job. So where I saw it happening is when it would say something like, be it resolved that the Episcopal Church sees holiness present in relationships between same-sex individuals, and be it further resolved that we offer a liturgy for those same-sex individuals, right? Conservatives were more than happy to say that you guys are nice together, but I'm not going to give you a liturgy. And they tried to split it. Remember that? Yeah. Yeah. And? It's all fair. That's why you want to know it.
And Lawson, my name is Canterbury House. Is the motion to divide is voted upon in our by diocesan rules, but it's just decided by the chair and general convention. Is that correct?
No, it's voted.
Okay, I know it's not in general convention because they made a point of order and I was wrong.
It used to be voted.
Gotcha.
I don't know.
Okay, but it's voted on here.
It's voted on here.
Let's do it quick.
Beth. Good, and if somebody over, Luke, if you could maybe have a question so Carmen has to sprint there, that would be great.
In the spirit of learning, is it appropriate to ask the parliamentarian a question, or is that?
Oh yeah.
Like in the group, or do you go off privately?
Well, here's the deal. How smart is the question? Do you want to get schooled in front of everyone? Or do you want to learn something off to the side that you later incorporate? Right? What I remember, and you might have been there, Beth, for this one. I remember Gay Clark Jennings running across the General Convention Hall, which is like 10 of these rooms, like running to a microphone, yelling, "Point of order!" Right? She knew what they were doing was out of order. And so when you yell point of order, you have to be recognized. She hadn't gotten herself to a microphone yet, but it was stunning. So she knew what she was doing. She did the point of order. I tend to wander off and ask, But then when I know for sure, I was kind of good at saying, no, the parliamentarian is wrong. Or the dean of the cathedral said to our Bishop Jeff, and I was standing behind her, she said, my parliamentarian disagrees with your parliamentarian. I was right. What else? Thank you all very much.